Hi, I'm Drew Lindsay. I'm an editor at the Chronicle Philanthropy. Welcome to the Commons in Conversation. It's our interview series in which we talk with nonprofit and philanthropy leaders working to bring Americans together and strengthen fractured communities. Thanks for joining us today. I think we've got a great conversation. Let me welcome our guests to start off with. First, I'd like to introduce Katie Loudin. She's the Strategic Development Director of West Virginia Community Development Hub, which is building networks of volunteers and leaders throughout West Virginia to drive positive change in their local communities. The organization has been at this work since 2009, and Katie herself has been doing this work for more than 15 years. She lives in Buckhannon, West Virginia, which is a town of about 5,000 people in the center of the state. And I'm going to give Katie a lot of props. She is at a conference, the Appalachian Funders Network conference right now. She has sort of secured herself off in a restaurant booth in a sense to have this conversation. So thanks for making that extra effort, Katie. Appreciate it. I'd also like to introduce Stephen Heintz, who is the president and CEO of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. It's a philanthropy created in 1940 by the sons of John D. Rockefeller Jr. Has programs in democratic practice, peace building, and sustainability, among other things. Stephen has a really remarkable and diverse background, but for this conversation, it's perhaps best to know that he co-chaired a national commission on the practice of democratic citizenship in the 21st century. He also co-authored the report, Our Common Purpose, Reinventing American Democracy for the 21st Century, which is really just a terrific blueprint for democracy reform in this country. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
So before we get started, I do want to set the stage a little bit. We are at a moment in time, and I live just outside Washington, D.C., where what's happening in D.C. and what's happening in federal politics, the division, the conflict, the dysfunction, a lot of folks are seeing that as a sign that democracy is in danger. And as a result, there's a lot of thought, a lot of energy, a lot of money that's going into fixing Washington and our political system. But with Stephen and Katie today, we're going to focus on a different line of work to strengthen democracy. The goal is still the same, but it work that happens at the local level with groups and community leaders trying to bring Americans together to connect neighbor to neighbor, to help people find common ground in the shared purpose of really just making their community a better place to live. Now, Katie and Stephen are pursuing this approach together. Rockefeller Brothers was a lead in assembling a $30 million funder collaborative that's supporting efforts to build communities in a lot of the rural areas in the country. This is called the Trust for Civic Life, and it launched last year. And Katie's West Virginia Development Hub, the Hub, is one of the Trust's first grantees. So I wanted to give you all that as a background, but let me shut up for a minute and turn to our guests. Katie, I want to start with you and start at sort of a 30,000 foot level in a sense of, for lack of a better word, your theory of change at the Hub and how you think the work of the Hub and organizations like this are working to strengthen democracy.
Thanks. First, I just want to say, thanks for the opportunity to do this. We're really excited in the trust model, and for the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and for the other funders in the collaborative to come together to do this is just remarkable. It's an experiment, and it's one that we see working every day in rural communities. So. Actually, just this week on Monday, the Trust for Civic Life released a new community survey that they put together, and they actually surveyed a lot of Hub community members as part of this. And they found that, national trust is really low, but local trust is high. And, this is something that we've seen in West Virginia. People want something different. In 2016, the Democratic primary went overwhelmingly for Bernie. And then, President Trump won, 70% of the vote in West Virginia last year. People want change. They don't know how to get it from the national level. National politicians just keep extracting from this region and failing us, right? So we don't know how to fix it up there, but all that we know is that we can do it together because that's all we've done. That's always what we've always done. So actually through the trust work, through this national survey that they released, they found that not merely talking with others was really not enough to basically inspire feelings of trust, agency, and belonging in communities, but it's this goal, like it's this taking action with others that actually increases those feelings of trust, agency, and belonging in your community. And that's what we see every day at the hub. And it doesn't matter if you take action in an informal or formal group, but it's the taking action together with your neighbors that is the difference maker. And so that is how we practice democracy in rural places. We just really don't call it that. For us, it's just community building and working together. And it's just what we've always done in Appalachia. So, the trust is building in civic hubs and civic entrepreneurs. That's what they've done this past year. And these are organizations and people who are building place and civic culture and infrastructure through strategic action. And, the hub is really proud to do this work in West Virginia. And we are, happy to learn alongside the other civic hubs and the civic entrepreneurs and the leaders that are doing this across the country in rural places.
That's terrific. And in a second, I want to drill down on the actual work and what it looks like, because I think that's critical. But first, let me ask Stephen, again, sort of at this 30,000 foot level, you individually and the fund itself have been at work and looking at democracy, particularly in Washington. But you the Rockefeller Brothers led the creation of the trust because there's another element to this work that you really wanted to invest in. So for you, talk about why you felt like it was important to go local in a sense with democracy work.
Well, thanks, Drew. And I'm delighted to be here with you, and especially with Katie, who is one of the leaders of our civic hubs and is doing a fantastic job in West Virginia and proving, I think, the theory of this case. And that theory is this: in the work of the commission that you mentioned earlier, we realized that there was a lot of work necessary to reform and repair the institutions and mechanisms of our democracy, of our constitutional democracy. And a lot of that has to happen ultimately at the national level. A lot of it has to happen in states and in municipal governments. But one of the things we also came to understand quite deeply through the work of that commission was that democracy is more than a system of self-government. It is more than a legislative process. It is more than voting. Democracy is a way of life, and it is nurtured in our communities, in our everyday experiences with each other as citizens in our democracy. And it's where we learn what de Tocqueville called the habits of the heart that are essential to a vibrant democratic society. And over the years, because trust in the national level of democracy has eroded so substantially, we came to see that we were not going to be able to restore that trust from the top down. It has to be restored from the bottom up. And this is long-term work, it's patient work, but it's absolutely essential work. So that's the theory of the case. And for funders like the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, we are a global foundation. We work around the world. And we also have a very robust program of democracy reform in the United States. But we are not equipped to be able to support the work in communities of the kind we are talking about here. We simply don't have the capacity, the knowledge, the expertise, et cetera. And so as we were developing all the recommendations in the report of the commission, as you noted, called Our Common Purpose, one of the 31 recommendations was to create a trust for civic life. And I think it's one of the most important recommendations in the report. And so we are very pleased that RBF was able to invest substantially in the founding of the trust, and also to attract other funders to create the first $30 million capital base for the work of the trust. And then, through a participatory design process that was literally led by leaders from rural and small town America, we created a structure through which these national level funds are flowing to communities through the hubs like the West Virginia Community Development Hub, but really based on being responsive, not being being directive. We're not marching into communities and telling them how to fix themselves. We're listening and responding to how they are proving that they are improving the quality of lives in their communities.
Well, we're going to put in the chat for folks links to both the original Our Common Purpose as well as the follow-up this past fall, The Habits of Heart and Mind. I think those are wonderful documents and really helpful to understand the sort of philosophical approach to this, as well as some of the tactical means. Katie, I do want to turn to you and talk about the work. You are one of many organizations pursuing this work. They pursue it in a lot of different ways, but talk a little bit about how you pursue it there and what it looks like so the audience can understand them.
Sure. We are a leading statewide community development nonprofit organization. Like you said, there are several hubs across the trust model, and they all look a little different. Some of them are community foundations. Some of them are, they're just very different. But for us, we're a community development nonprofit. We're an intermediary, and we do kind of like two major buckets of work. We do professional community coaching on the ground, really intensive relationship building capacity in mostly low-income, distressed rural places, building community leaders on the ground. And then at the same time, we are working to strengthen and build a stronger community development system that eliminates barriers to investment in rural places, to really, amplify the message of, those rural communities into larger spaces. So we're sort of like working in both places. So, our bread and butter is like really, in the community coaching work. So I can talk about that a little bit.
Please.
So at the community level, right, we never go into a community like where we aren't asked or where we're not invited. We're never going to go and say like, you should do this, right? If you want to be successful, like that's, we're not going to do that. So, in several, depending on what the funding structures look like or what available resources we have, sometimes we'll have an application, sometimes we'll have to name a community into a federal application if we have the resources available. But whatever the opportunity is, we have built a relationship with a community, and we start with a core leadership team. And in that core leadership team, we are looking for a diverse group, like a cross section of maybe like 5 to 9 community leaders. And I'm talking like retirees and PTA moms and a small business owner. Mayor Ingram in Montgomery to build this hubcap team said, I ran to be mayor, and then I found all the people who hated what I was doing, and I asked them to be on the hubcap team, and that's how he built his team, to be honest. And that's what I think our municipal leaders need to do. It's not the usual suspects that we need at the heart of what it takes to revitalize a community. So so if you can feed the group with 2 pizzas, that's the heart of like where the group can live, So we're constantly, so we are in a, usually, between 18 months, but sometimes up to 3 years, like in that kind of window, we are in an intensive community training and building process with that team. And depending on the program with the hub, it could be an entry-level program where like a community's just getting started in their community development journey, or it could be a community that's been with us and they're like, really leveling up into some like major pre-development projects, like they've already been with us through other programs. So depending on which program is the curriculum that they're getting, through that long-term relationship. And in that, they're doing broader community engagement events. So they're identifying their assets. They're talking about how to engage the small business community and what recreational assets they have and what their young people in their community want and how they're engaging diverse people who don't feel welcome in their community, right? And so it's like, what makes Hinton special, right? It's the river. It's like the beautiful trails and who uses the trails, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
these are the things that people are talking about together. And then they engage the community and they figure out what the community wants and they come back and they work on that. And then, we help them figure out the financing, and often we'll have like a little pool of like mini grant funds that they can access. And so,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they'll build a community garden or a series of raised beds, and they'll get
Yeah.
that small win done. It's like even just coordinating the logistics of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is like, how do you process invoices and how do you make sure people get paid for supplies? So it's just the nuts and bolts of
Yeah.
people figuring out how to work together. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they do that, and then they take and then they work with brownfields and they start to
Mm-hmm.
tackle abandoned properties and
Yeah.
brownfield sites and bigger problems. And so you see over a period of years how a small community team leverages and stacks these wins. And we
Mm-hmm.
bring in technical assistance providers and we bring in financing experts.
Yeah.
And then, a small place like Richwood, over a period of 4 years, over 42 new businesses open in this small community that
Yeah.
has seen, a timber boom and bust that,
Mm-hmm.
was just devastated by flooding
Yeah.
in 2016, and so it's like about, community building, and it's about being in it with the communities for a long haul. And people are hungry to do
Mm-hmm.
this together. They just need
Mm-hmm.
the tools and the resources. And so, we've seen really lately, especially in the last 4 years, with the amount of federal funding
Yeah.
coming into Appalachia and into coal communities, our communities have taken advantage of that, with,
Yeah.
access to, funding to converting like abandoned mine lands and access to solar, and just
Mm-hmm.
taking advantage of all these opportunities available to them.
Yeah.
And they're just like leveling up into the
Yeah.
opportunities, and we've loved to see it. So and so that's what we've been trained to do. And it's just like it starts with that small
Sure.
project and
Sure.
they just
Sure.
stack those wins, and we've
Mm-hmm.
just been alongside them, championing them the whole time.
Can I ask? I'm curious, in a sense, if you have any ideas about why this doesn't happen organically. In a sense, why is there anything within the civic fabric or the culture of the country as a whole right now where perhaps this doesn't happen as naturally as it might? It requires an intervention in a sense to get it going.
Honestly, I think it's kind of a tricky thing, but I think
Yeah.
it's probably a little bit overwhelming. I
Mm-hmm.
think people
Mm-hmm.
don't I think people don't know how to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and and there are so many there are just challenges everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
The opioid crisis, what it has done to Appalachia and what it has done to Southern West Virginia, and
Sure.
um, but it's like people, once they just come together and get a win, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, it just magnifies itself,
That's
And so I
amazing.
think
Yeah.
people can latch onto a good thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they realize they have power that is
Mm-hmm.
just like
Yeah.
it's just unknown to them before.
That's
So,
great.
yeah.
Stephen, can you talk a little bit about some of the other grantees with the trust and some of the other work that you're seeing that is like what Katie's doing, but in different expression in a sense?
Sure. One of the great things about the trust is that in addition to being a re-granting agency, in essence,
Mm-hmm.
channeling national level philanthropic resources to very local community level activity, it is also a learning community,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a network builder. So
Yeah.
we are connecting Katie to the work that people are doing in our other hubs. We now have grants that we've made to a total of 20 hubs across the country in all kinds of different communities. We identified 4 kind of high target priority regions that include the Black Belt of the Deep South, Central Appalachia, which is where Katie is located, the Southwest border, and America's tribal lands. And that doesn't mean all of the grants have been made in those 4 areas, but I think in the first round, it was about 50% of them. And in the second round of grants that we're going to be making this year, our goal is to increase the percentage of grants going to those priority regions. I think it's to 75%, something like that in any case. So, some of these are, these civic hubs are community foundations that have been around for a very long time and have deep roots in their community, and also are a source of local resources for this kind of work that we can now leverage and partner with to expand the resources available. Some of them are citizen organizations that are relatively new and trying to create new civic space. So it's a real variety. And one of the things that's important about the work is that we are trying to help the other grantees learn from what Katie's been doing. And Katie will also have the opportunity to benefit from the experiences of other community hubs around the country. And this will continue to grow over the years. Our ambition is to really expand this work over the years ahead. But the diversity of the hubs, the diversity of the communities, the diversity of the people in the communities, there are different methodologies of how they are bringing people together to solve local problems, is what makes this, I think, so exciting. And, but the common themes are there. As Katie mentioned earlier, the survey we just commissioned really demonstrated that the themes are, it's not about bringing people together for dialogue across lines of difference, which a lot of people talk about. It's inviting people to have the opportunity to work together to actually solve problems or just improve their communities. And it is every little step, every little improvement can get another step and another improvement. And it's the aggregate of these things, these activities, and the different people that they bring into the process over time that creates a wider web of vibrant civic spirit and civic activity.
And either of you, coming off that survey, why is it that you feel like work, coming together for work and not for conversation? Instead, what is it about working together and even perhaps working together for your community that is sort of a magic sauce that can help people? I'll be cliche and say help people take off their red and blue shirts and come together and do things.
Well, I might start, Katie, unless you.
Yep, please.
I think, and I'm really interested if Katie agrees with this. I think it's because when you bring people together with the purpose of talking to each other, that immediately invites them to be in those spaces that are blue or red or someplace in between, because that's what they bring to that conversation. And so that's where it starts. And it's hard to get, once you get that conversation going, it's hard to get off it. And it's also very hard to make it productive. On the other hand, if people are coming together and saying, this park really is a bit of a mess and it could be a whole lot more beautiful and we would all enjoy it a lot more if it was, what could we do to figure out how to make it better? And then it's a concrete question of action, and they don't get into, they may have a different view. Well, I think we need more flowers, or I think we need a baseball diamond. And that's a healthy debate about how to use the resources, but it's concrete and it avoids the political, debate that otherwise surrounds everything we do.
Yep. Katie, anything from what your experience is?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, people come together, they want good schools, they want good places to raise their family, they want good parks, they want live entertainment, they want, beautiful communities, they want healthy main streets, they want good jobs, right? And they want to work together to do that, right? And so it doesn't really matter, we can talk about all the ways to get there, and that's what people are willing to do. And I think when you sit in dialogue, we can talk about all the ways that we're different, and it can be very painful, but people just want to move together and they want to be solution oriented together.
Yep. Well, I think that's key, the solution oriented, because I think there's a sense of a lack of agency and a lack of sense we can't get things done. So that's important.
Yeah. People want to see results, and they want to demonstrate that they can contribute to results.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me ask, I'm in the middle of reporting a story in which I'm talking to a lot of Katies out there, a lot of folks who are doing this work at the local level. to get a sense of how what's happening in Washington may be influencing their work one way or another. And Katie, I hope we can talk to you a little bit about this. I know the funding cuts at this point are posing a challenge for you. So talk a little bit about what's going on in your organization and how you're trying to adapt.
Sure. It's bleak right now for organizations across the country, and it's really not different for us. The hub is 72% federally grant funded, and so we're definitely feeling it right now. We have been building capacity in Appalachia through opportunities like the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which was a historic $62 million investment from the EDA into Southern West Virginia coal communities. Through this, we're working with 16 communities as part of the Act Now Coalition. And when we saw those initial federal funding freezes, we had partners who had to stop construction projects that were paused and disrupted. We had, communities waiting on funding. So this is a moment where like all this disruption, like communities are waiting with projects ready to go that are it's breaking our reputation and trust on the ground, right? Through this. So it's been pretty painful. Even more heartbreaking, we are part of the Green Bank for Rural America, which was a greenhouse gas reduction fund, Clean Communities Investment Accelerator awardee. This is a $500 million EPA award that's currently tied up in lawsuits. And so, we've had to make some really hard decisions as an organization, and we were running the community engagement strategy for that, and that is all stalled out and, in lawsuits. And, you can read, articles in national organizations to learn more about that. And I can't talk more about that right now. So that's just been really painful, but, we're, like I said, we use this federal funding. We've been a pass through, we pass through a lot of money every year through these mini grant funds and through these pre-development technical assistance funds. Like, we sent actually almost $300,000 into communities last year. We worked with 42 communities, sent almost $300,000 into those communities, and those 42 communities, they leveraged about $12.4 million in external funding with that money. And so we're seeing huge impacts. And when our communities have these projects ready to go and we can't get the money, out to them, like when it's frozen, when it's paused, it's just breaking trust, and it's a big problem. The other major concern on the horizon is what's going on with AmeriCorps. We run a really vibrant AmeriCorps Vista program, and all of this capacity that we build in communities, often it is sustained when we're done at the end of the program through like a 1-year AmeriCorps Vista with the community. And with AmeriCorps staff being cut at the federal level, even though like the AmeriCorps Vista program looks okay for right now, with the federal staff being cut, we do have concerns about program delivery and what that's going to look like as, as the year progresses. So, I would just be remiss to say, the hub, we need more grant resources to sustain civic culture in West Virginia and Central Appalachia. We have really ramped up our capacity into this moment to take advantage of the federal resources, but they are not there right now. We are building capacity on the ground, and we know from the trust and from our own 16 years of experience that people trust local leaders. We don't have $500 million coming from the Green Bank, but we could build, we have projects ready to go from economic resilience plans that could benefit from slow patient capital, and $2 million of pre-development technical assistance could ready those projects into slow patient capital through small deals. Like we don't need $500 million to make a huge impact in Appalachia. So I would just be so upset if the 16 communities and accelerate if these economic resilience plans
Yep.
sat
Yep.
on a shelf because they could not launch the next step. So, I just would implore, anyone who is like thinking about what can I do to strengthen democracy? Like, we are building the ground game. We are
Yep.
ready to
Yep.
go.
Mhm.
So, if you care about, communities advancing, like, we are ready to go. We have communities that have the resources and they are
Mhm.
excited.
Mhm.
So
Stephen, can you offer a bit of the national picture for these civic culture groups that are in communities building civic health and culture? What is the outlook for them?
Well, it's very much
Okay, I found this on the web for culture group.
the kind of outlook that Katie just described. Unfortunately, and there's a terrible irony in this tragic situation, which is that the federal funds that were beginning to flow in ways that are really supportive of the kinds of community level activities that Katie has been describing are now being cut off, and
Right.
just at a time when we are actually working hard to try to gradually restore trust in the federal government, this action is actually further destroying trust. And
Yeah.
that is really
Yeah.
a shame. And quite
Mhm.
frankly, the philanthropic community is not in a position financially, simply, to fill all these gaps. We can't do it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we are trying to spend more, and at the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, instead of spending the mandatory 5% of our income every year, this year we're probably spending, we know we're spending more than 6.1%. It'll probably turn out to be more like 6.5%. And we will
Yep.
keep doing that for a few years, but we can't do that forever and maintain, our ability to work.
Mhm.
And other foundations are in the same position. So just at a time when we're demonstrating how the combination of government resources and private resources together can create really, extraordinary progress,
Yep. Yep.
we are losing that important partner, and it is really
Mhm.
a shame.
Could I ask also a question a little bit about, and Katie, perhaps for you, the folks that you're working with on the ground? You arguably what's happening in Washington is sort of the worst it's been in terms of what's coming out of Washington, division, and the question of how do people that you're working with respond to that, and is it debilitating to them, or does it more encourage them to dig in a little deeper?
honestly, like, this is just not new for us in Appalachia. Like, we
Yeah.
stopped expecting help a long time ago.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
basically just don't pay attention. We don't expect it to come. It's like
Mhm.
another flood,
Yeah.
no help comes,
Right. Right.
and so we just roll up our sleeves and help each other. What we
Mhm.
don't have are resources. We need greater participation with philanthropy. We
Mhm.
need strategic support, strategic action. We have demand and we cannot meet the appetite.
Mhm.
We know that people want to build a new future for themselves, and we are ready to work together to do that. Madison, West Virginia, in Boone County, West Virginia,
Yep.
was, the very heart of, the most devastating impacts of the opioid crisis. And,
Yeah.
coal country, West Virginia, over 100 people turned up just a few weeks ago to Good News Madison. They're an
Mhm.
Accelerate West Virginia community because guess what? People want to do something positive in their community. They want to hear about the good work that's being done and they want to get involved.
Yep.
Just 2 weeks ago in Hinton, West Virginia, they had a volunteer fair. This is
Mhm.
like a job fair, but
Yeah.
for volunteers.
Uh,
Like over 100 people turned out, right? For a
right.
volunteer fair. They recruited more people to their
Mhm.
core team, right? This
Mhm.
is unheard of,
Right.
right? So in I don't think that, we're not bowling alone in West Virginia, right? It
Right.
just
Right.
looks different, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people are ready to mobilize and get excited. We don't need Washington we'll
Yep.
just let them do whatever they're going to do over there.
Yep.
We will roll up our sleeves and help each other. And if people want to join us, we would welcome it.
Well, that's great. And that's maybe we in there. That's a little bit of an encouraging sign, because one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you all today is because I feel like so much of what comes out of Washington is divisive and conflict and dysfunction. And what y'all are saying is at the ground level, there are a lot of people who want to work and want to make things better. And those are the folks I think we need to pay attention to and track. So thank y'all. I really, really appreciate you coming on and doing this conversation. Very helpful. Thank you to the audience for joining us. Again, we have put up some links to some additional information that you can take a look at to go a little bit deeper. Our next conversation, Commons and Conversation, is coming up on May 20th with Hallie Lee, who is the author of The Big We. She's also a co-founder of the Donors of Color Network. So there will be registration information for that on our LinkedIn page shortly, and I hope we can see you then. In the meantime, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.